Hello, you're listening to Wine Blast. Welcome to this latest edition of our News and Views show, where we do a swift recap on the most intriguing recent wine news. And we hear from you lovely people, answering your questions and airing your feedback.
Indeed. Don't forget our Guess the Missing Word in the Wine headline item. You know, world famous these days, and a firm favourite in the schedule
I think
now.
it might be famous in our little world.
And maybe that's what it is, just our world. But anyway, I think there's something in there that makes us laugh, so, you know, we're going to stick with it. There's some sort of value. We're doing it.
We are. We can't promise a repeat of the Dutch nuns from last time, but I guarantee we've got treats in store.
Well, absolutely.
Haven't we?
You know, absolutely. I can trail the facts. We're going to be touching on everything from marriage and divorce to weight loss drugs, a vineyard on an airport roof, and whether cling film removes cork taint.
Don't forget light strike too. This fascinating and troubling topic we covered recently, and which caused quite a stir, didn't it? Making international headlines and resulting in a much wider discussion. So we'll be recapping on that. We'll also be touching on Tuesday night wines, sweats. We'll explain later. It's not what you think it is. Ukraine and Merlot in the bath.
Merlot in the bath. I think that's probably
does
what
that
I
sound?
need for my chest.
You probably do.
Can I just
don't you?
apologise for
You
the
can inhale
state of my voice at the moment? There's been lots going on, but I think the solution is Merlot in the bath.
Merlot in
there
the
we
bath.
go. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Meantime, we need to be cracking on, and we're going to start on a sobering note.
Are we? Oh.
I'm afraid.
Oh.
Yes, sorry. And that's the
Let's get it
news
over with.
that the global wine scene is in a bit of a state.
Yeah, so we're referring to the recent release of the OIV's State of the World Vine and Wine Sector in 2023, the annual report by this intergovernmental body, which collects data from 50 member states representing 87% of world wine production and 71% of world wine consumption. And its pronouncements were eye-opening.
They were. You know, to summarise, in 2023, global wine production hit a 60-year low at 247 million hectolitres. Global wine consumption dropped 2.6% from the already low 2022 level to reach the lowest level since 1996.
Wow, that's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, 28 years.
Yeah.
And the world's vineyard continued its long-term decline, shrinking 0.5% from 2022 levels to reach 7.2 million hectares.
Hard to see many bright spots in there, isn't it? The OIV did gamely try, as reported on the BBC, saying at least declining consumption was matching declining production. So the wine lake wasn't swelling as a result, and prices weren't falling through the floor. But I don't think that's going to give much comfort to the multitude of wine growers around the world, is it?
Absolutely not. I think sparkling wine was a slight sort of buck in the trend, wasn't it? Going up very slightly by value, but not much. And the elephant in the room, of course, is climate change. Wine production is being hit by extreme weather events, and 2023 is a prime example. We're talking rot, floods and hail in Italy, severe drought and heat in Spain, rain deluges in Greece, wildfires and flooding in Chile, spring frosts and hailstorms in Argentina, mildew in South Africa, and unusually cold, rainy conditions in Australia.
Crikey. Now, in terms of declining consumption, which is equivalent to 800 million fewer bottles than in 2022, the OIV points to several things. Firstly, China's significant drop-off in wine drinking since 2018 to less than half what it was. Also, the lingering after effects of lockdown, not to mention geopolitical tensions and energy crises. I suppose you could actually add in the trend in younger generations to moderate or even eliminate their alcohol consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. But one other thing is key, and that is cost. The price of wine has been going up. You know, it's linked to inflation and things like disruptions in the global supply chain and hikes in the cost of supplies like bottles, boxes and corks. And this at a time when consumer purchasing power is at a crashing low due to the cost of living crisis, also fueled by inflation and uncertainty.
Yeah, so the figures don't look rosy, do they? But it's not all doom and gloom, we have to say this. You know, wine producers worldwide are working on tackling climate change. This has the potential to be a big USP for wine in years to come if the producers and trade work on reducing impact and maximising the potential of vineyards, for example, to draw down carbon and become, they become the beacons of sustainability.
Yeah. In terms of the declining vineyard production and consumption, it's not necessarily all bad. Much of this vineyard, it could well be argued, is an anachronism from days when your average person drank 60 plus litres per capita annually, loads of wine, most of it plonk. Particularly in classic producing nations like France, Spain, and Italy, we'd have you sit down for your lunch and have 2 litres of Vin Ordinaire or whatever it was. These days consumption habits have changed.
It's different. It's very different.
People tend to drink less, but more discerningly when they do. So, wine, I think, is overdue a structural shift to producing less but better and more sustainably all round.
Yeah, and probably a bit less red and more white rosé and sparkling, as we covered in our Wine of the Year episode. Easy to get downhearted by figures like these, but I think best to take them with a pinch of salt and try to see the bigger picture. Wine is not going anywhere, but equally there is a necessary evolution, as you were saying, which is going to entail a lot of hard work and some creativity too.
Yeah. That said, we've picked up on a couple of similarly challenging headlines. I think getting the bad news out of the way first. I think that's our approach here.
There is some good coming.
There is some good coming. One from Mining is suggesting so-called miracle weight loss drugs could hit wine consumption. These drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing those right.
No idea.
Have been featured a lot in the press lately and are intended for type 2 diabetes, but can also result in dramatic weight loss. Apparently, though, they not only suppress appetite, but also the desire to drink alcohol. Given their popularity, this is concerning alcohol and wine producers.
Yeah, apparently research has shown that people taking these weight loss drugs consumed 62% less alcohol, and more than 1 in 5 had stopped drinking altogether. And people taking these drugs often represent a wine drinking demographic. That said, it remains to be seen how long the popularity of these drugs will last. And apparently 2/3 of people who go on them come off within a year due to the side effects, which of course include not fancying a glass of wine.
That's not right.
It's no good at all, is it?
Good.
Heavens.
But, I suppose, if you think about it, given how much of an issue obesity is, and I guess how profitable this kind of drug could be in the future, it's definitely concerning for wine. Also concerning is the headline, The Smartphone's Role in Wine's Decline. This from Wine Searcher, asking whether the hedonistic alcohol-fueled antics of youth are being lost for fear of being caught on smartphone camera and publicly shamed. It also ponders whether spiking rates of anxiety, depression, general mental health challenges, often anecdotally linked to smartphone use, discourages alcohol consumption too.
Yeah, and there's also apparently a big rise in cannabis use and related things like CBD or THC-infused products, especially in the US among the younger demographics. And if you add into the mix the neo-prohibition movement, with the World Health Organization now putting out increasingly aggressive anti-alcohol messaging, wine has got its work cut out.
It does. But
really
it's not, it's not insurmountable, is it? Wine does have to win hearts and minds and fight for its share of throat, but it does things other drinks struggle to do, like pair so seamlessly with food and convey a sense of time and place, and in moderation probably contributing to a healthy microbiome and lifestyle.
Yeah. We should add a disclaimer here that we're not doctors, obviously. This is just our opinion.
Yeah, but it's we did have Professor Tim Spector on the podcast saying the same thing, and
we did.
We're going to be doing another episode on this soon. There is a body of opinion that backs this up. It's our firm view from reading very widely as confirmed non-doctors.
And maybe things could be helped. I'm going to move on to a brilliant initiative we read about recently, whereby an Italian restaurant is offering diners a free bottle of wine in exchange for locking their phones away. Now, this is Al Condominio in Verona, where if you choose to lock your phone in a box while you eat, in exchange, you receive a bottle of wine.
Now, owner Angelo Lela said customers can choose to renounce technology while enjoying a convivial moment together. Technology is becoming a problem. There's no need to look at your phone every 5 seconds, but for many people, it's like a drug. This way, they have an opportunity to put it aside and drink some good wine. It's a beautiful thing to see. And apparently, 90% of diners take up the offer.
I bet they do. I imagine the publicity hasn't harmed either.
Exactly.
So a very smart initiative, either way.
Yeah, maybe we could instigate a similar policy in our household. I'm just thinking about it, where guests have to give up their phones. Mind you, it wouldn't work with the kids, would it? If we get the kids together, we can't give them a bottle of wine.
Not really,
a free
no.
bottle of wine.
It might
we
have
get
to be something soft.
we're gonna not do that. We get in trouble. Anyway, let's turn to another positive headline, which is drinking high quality wine does make you feel happier.
It's official.
It's official. This from the drinks business, referring to an Italian study focusing on whether expectations about product quality, in this case, good wine, would impact the pleasantness of an experience. And it did.
Yeah, maybe not so surprising to find that out. But apparently wearable sensors and questionnaires showed, according to study author Dr. Lucia Bellecci, that wine undoubtedly generates a significant emotional response to consumers, which is, and she said, multifaceted and attributable to the quality level of the wine tasted.
You say it's not surprising, but, you know, one of the things we're always banging on about is that it's easy to quantify the bad news, like, I don't know, the harm alcohol does, the cost of hospital admissions or police time, whatever. But what's not so easy is quantifying the joy and the pleasure that wine can bring. So you can never cite that in response,
no, that's true.
And I like this study because it kind of sets out to address that side of things.
Yeah. So if you're a scientist and listening, please, help us move this on and quantify joy.
Let's quantify joy.
Especially the joy wine can bring.
Yeah, we'll offer to be guinea pigs.
We will.
In this experiment.
Of course we will.
But we certainly would attest, anecdotally to the positive effects of this joy and pleasure. And wine needs all the help it can get right now.
It does indeed. On which note, another positive headline. Here we go. Okay. Light drinking reduces stress and thus increases longevity. Now, this from The Guardian. A US study showed that light to moderate drinking reduced brain stress signalling in the amygdala, with attendant positive impacts on the cardiovascular system.
So apparently when the amygdala is on high alert, so too is the nervous system, which increases blood pressure and heart rate and triggers the release of inflammatory cells. If the stress is chronic, long term, then it raises the risk of obesity, diabetes and heart disease. And
the study found that within the 50,000 patient sample, light to moderate drinking was associated with nearly double the cardioprotective effects in individuals with a history of anxiety, sort of compared to the others.
No, that's what I call news.
We like that news.
Though they were, of course, very keen to add, this shouldn't mean we ignore the other potential dangers of alcohol.
Of course.
Like potentially higher risk of cancer and the well-documented risks of heavier drinking as well.
Safety never takes a day off. Right, we're coming to the end of our news segment, but just a few more things before we finish up, including the outstanding news that a new terminal at Florence Airport is going to have a vineyard on its roof, which will make your arrival so much more stylish and fun.
Yeah, now these visionary plans have been drawn up by Raffaele Vignoli Architects to install a 7.7 hectare vineyard, which will be made into wine on the airport premises on the roof, bringing a new meaning to the phrase flying winemaker. Once completed
terrible.
In 2026, the terminal is scheduled to accommodate nearly 6 million passengers annually, which makes for a very ready market.
Now, this might seem like a slightly outlandish idea, but what's behind it all is intriguing. The owners of Florence Airport are Corporación América, a conglomerate that spans airports, energy and infrastructure, and also agribusiness. Now, its president is Argentine-Armenian Eduardo Arnekian, who also owns two wineries, Bodega del Fin del Mundo in Patagonia and Caras in Armenia, both run by his daughter Juliana, who we had on the pod not too long ago.
The Armenia episode.
Indeed.
There you go. This pod helps deliver you vineyards on airport roofs, among many other things. I'm not sure that we can quite tie those things together, can we?
Not.
Anyway, we'll take it. And this podcast also brings you news about cling film.
This is true.
This is the headline from The Real Review, which asks, does cling film remove cork taint? What do you think?
I'm sceptical, I have to say. Now, I've always been a big believer in the value of cling film. It can do so many useful things, but I'm determined, like a lot of people, to avoid using it and go for more sustainable, reusable options these days, as you do. And B, I really don't see how it can remove cork taint.
Are we really discussing cling film on Wine
I
Blast?
think we might be.
We are, aren't we?
Oh, dear.
Here we are. Apparently, according to science, this headline is not a million miles off. Polyethylene, or PE, which is often in cling film, can adsorb TCA, which is the noxious-smelling product of cork taint, onto the membrane surface through hydrophobic interactions.
Gosh.
Yes, I didn't understand that. In other words, TCA has more affinity for polyethylene than water or wine. So if you stick it in the mixture, it will stick to the surface of the polyethylene, and you can actually then take it out.
It does sound quite amazing. Are we talking just regular supermarket cling film?
Yeah, sadly, it's not quite that simple, is it? Of course, it was never going to be. Because you need food grade, 100% pure polyethylene to do this. And cling film most certainly is not that. It's generally made up of various polymers.
Okay.
Which is, of course, disappointing. But, imagine having some food grade, 100% pure polyethylene in your bag to whip out and cure that tragically cork bottle. As many of us will know that feeling, won't you? Imagine you could have just something to whip it in and say, aha.
Aha, there we go.
Here we go.
I do quite like that idea. It's still a bit weird, though.
It is a bit weird.
And
a bit far-fetched.
I'm going to move on to what's also weird, but still dovetail there, but slightly wonderful, is our... Guess the missing word in the headline game. I couldn't quite wait to get onto this, I'm afraid.
Yes.
So to wrap up our news segment, I'm going to say sommelier what tapes guaranteed to what? So that's my headline. Sommelier what tapes guaranteed to what?
Okay, my mind's going in all sorts of directions with this one, but I'm going to go with the one that I can't help not saying, and that's sommelier sex tapes guaranteed to pop your cork.
Oh, if only it was. Anything else? You got anything to top that?
That's all I've got, really. I can't go better than that. What about something like sommelier meditation tapes guaranteed to help you wind down?
Oh,
how about
that? That's bad.
I mean,
it's a nice try, and it's actually probably a lot better than what it actually is, because it's actually sommelier sleep tapes guaranteed to lull you to sleep. There we go. Wow. Right. So anyway, this is a slightly hilarious an initiative from Juice. Still can't quite work out if it's an April Fool, to be honest, but we'll go with it. So this is where a gravel-voiced sommelier drones on about Tuscany. Now, normally, you'd obviously have to fight with every fibre of your being to stay awake and look polite and interested. But the whole point of this is it's actually designed to help you fall asleep. Jeez. So Juice co-founder David Dvorsky said, if people can fall asleep and maybe even dream about Brunello di Montalcino, I think we've succeeded.
That's so funny. Brunello dreams.
I'm very happy with Brunello dreams. I'm not sure about a sommelier sleep tape. Brunello dreams are good.
Yes, you probably want the Brunello there, not necessarily the sommelier there in your dreams. Anyway, we'll be sure to put a link to that on the site, because you can find this on YouTube, and it's surprisingly effective. Anyway, this podcast is probably also surprisingly effective in putting you to sleep too. Let's move on.
Unless we move swiftly.
I have got a headline for you.
Go on.
Brits marry on what and divorce on what? So I'll give you the headline again. It's Brits marry on what and divorce on what?
Oh, gosh. Marry on hope. And divorce on or over lack of funds for wine.
There you go. Bang, slam dunk.
That it?
Yes.
I would divorce over that, would you not?
I'm not even going to enter that debate. It's tricky territory, but I'll
tell
take
me
your
what
answer.
it is. Tell me what it is.
Brits marry on English fizz and divorce on champagne.
Really?
I know. It's a surprising finding, isn't it? So this was a survey by Aldi. Well, official in inverted commas. A survey by Aldi, which must have posed some pretty weird questions.
That's very true, isn't it?
But was essentially asked 2,000 UK wine drinkers about the occasions people drank certain wines on. So 78% of respondents said they had a clear wine preference according to style and occasion. For example, Sauvignon Blanc while cooking. That's pretty uncontroversial. Then 30% said they'd pair English fizz with a wedding, and 15% would opt for champagne for a divorce celebration.
So be warned, if I start stocking up on champagne, your days are numbered.
Yeah, well, when aren't you stocking up on champagne? That's why I'm constantly terrified.
I think I'm more likely to stock up on English fizz, actually.
Well, you do a healthy amount of both, to be honest. So I'm just terrified all the time.
Never mind stocking up,
and
drinking.
Also concerned about our household finances. But let's keep moving. Just to finish off, the most popular matches were Prosecco with brunch.
Ooh.
33%.
Bit cheaper.
Pinot Grigio after work, 30%. And pale rosé for summer garden drinking, also 30%. There were also check this out, significant preferences for Carver for moving house, Viognier with a good book, and Merlot in the bath.
There it is.
There it is.
Mind boggles. I'm not thinking
Merlot in the bath.
Merlot in the bath. Well, I'm thinking of all the things I do around the house and what I pair them with. And I reckon I'm going to say ironing a neat gin, given it's my least favourite activity.
Okay, we're going to move on. But please,
Burnt
it's
shirts,
a great
here we
idea.
go.
Please, you guys out there, send us in your thoughts. What matches do you have? The more bizarre, the
Absolutely.
better. Anyway, on that bombshell, I think we better draw this first half to a close. Coming up, we're getting into the really quite justified hoo-ha over Light Strike, as well as responding to your questions and views from Tuesday night wines to Ukraine and beyond. To recap so far, the news tells us that the global wine scene is in a bit of a state, with falling production and consumption, and both weight loss drugs and smartphones are the enemies of wine. On the plus side, light drinking can reduce stress and thus increase longevity. Drinking high quality wine can make you feel happier. And a new terminal at Florence Airport is going to have a vineyard on its roof.
And don't forget the breaking news that cling film doesn't quite remove cork taint. But anyway, continuing on the theme of taint, a few episodes ago we tackled the topic of light strike, the phenomenon whereby wine bottled in clear glass can be tainted or spoiled very easily by exposure to light, whether daylight or interior lighting. Now, we covered the scientific research and conducted our own very pseudo-scientific experiment, both of which clearly show this is a serious issue. And yet we continue to see so many wines in clear bottles, don't we?
Now, we termed it daylight robbery, and it duly drew a fair bit of attention. It made national headlines in the UK, appearing in the Times, the Telegraph, Mail Online, Classic FM, and it even went international too, picked up by Gambero Rosso and beyond. We'll put links up on our site. And incidentally, this is the third time this podcast has made national headlines in the last year, for the right reasons, I hasten to add. I'm not sure many other wine outlets have done that.
Well, let's not risk blowing our own trumpets here too much. And what we did love just as much was you guys getting in touch about this and sort of riffing on the same subject. So to cover just a bit of the feedback, Panagiotis got in touch afterwards, he's the winemaker and the researcher we interviewed, to say good job and that he hoped the OIV will make a recommendation, presumably about the risks of clear glass, and that governments will include rules about the packaging for appellation wines at least. He also added a few interesting tidbits, including that light strike makes white wines go less yellow. So the opposite of oxidation. I would not have thought that, would you?
That's really interesting, isn't it? And I completely agree with him. There needs to be action taken on this front. And actually, Panagiotis' co-author on the light strike studies we cited, Professor Sylvia Carlin, also got in touch to compliment us on the episode, which is very kind of her. And she said, let's hope that by spreading the word, something will change. And, we really need change on this. Beyond that, Professor Nick Spencer wrote in to say, amazing podcast on Light Strike. Loved your sensorial experiment, complete with control. Very solid research. That's a compliment from a scientist. Wow.
Professor.
Thanks,
Professor no less.
Thanks, Nick. And Peter Humphreys wrote in from Florida to say, this was an amazing episode. I had no idea this was a problem with wine. I can't understand why producers would sacrifice the quality of their product for the sake of perception. Oh, here. It will bite them in the end. Keep up the great work. I always enjoy your podcast, but this one was over the top. Exceptional.
Now, Per Kvalvag wrote in from Norway to say, thanks for your informative and fun podcast and for the most recent important and alarming episode. As a Scandinavian, I just want to remark that The Emperor's New Clothes is no real folk tale, but an author's pseudo-folk tale written by Hans Christian Andersen. And the Emperor wasn't quite naked, but in his royal underwear.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Doesn't help the poor wines, though. By the way, orange wines come in clear bottles. I wonder if they are just as vulnerable to light strike.
Yeah, we've noticed that too, actually. Well, we're noticing so many clear bottles now since we've done the podcast.
We are, really,
all
truly.
over the place.
Every time you look, you think,
sort
oh,
of
it's
shudder,
clear bottle.
But, to answer your question, Per, I guess orange wines would be in between white and red, wouldn't they, in terms of vulnerability?
Yeah.
With
presumably,
more protective polyphenols than white wine. but for the most part, less than red. But I guess that would make them not dissimilar to rosé, depending on the style of the rosé.
Yeah.
Which is clearly at serious risk, as our experiment showed. So frankly, I think, any wine in clear bottles isn't good news, to be honest.
Now, we've also had tons of feedback on social media on this, and we're just going to pick out a few. Nick Fee said, I'll be buying from the back of the shelf at least from now on. Liz Gabay MW, who we featured on the pod, said, once you know about it, it really is a scandal. It is ignored. Nova Cadmarta MW said, the easy solution is to normalise rosé and other wines in dark bottles, which will protect it.
Yeah. We also had Xiaoshong Lu sharing a very sad story about a bottle of Cristal 2008. Now, Cristal, of course, famously comes in a clear bottle, albeit wrapped in orange cellophane, which is easy to take off. But his generous friend had displayed this bottle of Cristal without its protective wrapper, as, of course, we've said it's tempting to do, on a sun-drenched shelf for years.
Years, yeah.
And Xiaoshong described tasting said wine as having a total lack of fruit and freshness, but plenty of stewed cabbage and damp cardboard, just like how the podcast described a light strike wine would taste. What a shame for what could have been a fabulous bottle. I couldn't even use it to deglaze my pan.
Oh dear. It's so depressing, isn't it, when you hear these stories? I
know,
mean,
it's so
especially I think when it's a special bottle.
Exactly.
And this is such a preventable issue. The wine world just needs to buck up its act on this one. We are not going to let it drop.
No.
But it's great to see that other wine folk are taking this theme up as well.
Exactly. I even had a comment from a major producer of Provençal rosé saying he'd tuned in and would be reassessing his bottles in the future as a result. So, there is hope.
There is hope, yeah. And we also had some interesting correspondence with the guys at Pacamama who make those flat plastic or PET wine bottles that actually fit through your letterbox. Now, they're working with people like Aldi and the Wine Society, and they're quite proactive on the R&D front. So they got in touch to say that their colourless recycled PET bottles include a UV absorber, which removes some of the damaging UV and protects wines more than flint glass.
Yeah, so we asked some probing questions, as you'd expect, and it turns out the UV barrier they use, which is master batch additive at 1% dosing, whatever that means, is incorporated. It's incorporated into the bottle material at levels that mean recycling is still okay, which was the issue about coating clear glass, if you remember we mentioned.
Yeah.
Their research has shown that only 2% of light in two critical UV wavelengths, which would otherwise damage wine, only 2% gets through versus 80% for flint glass, and it adds only 2p a bottle to the cost.
Now, visible light is still damaging in these clear plastic bottles, but they say they do 20% better than flint glass at this third potentially damaging wavelength. And about half the bottles they sell are clear, for what it's worth.
Yeah, interesting. I still feel the best way forward for plastic or glass is for dark containers. About you, but
it really is, yeah.
And it just sets the precedent. But if you have to put it in clear packaging, maybe this is one solution. We probably need to do a bit more research, don't we? But anyway, one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and just to finish off on Light Strike, listener Andreas Tischhauser from Switzerland asked, is there also a risk of light strike for sweet wines like Sauterne, or can sugar counteract this? And he also asked, given it takes very little time for light strike to kick in, whether time in the glass before drinking will have an effect, or should we all drink from black glasses?
Good questions. I think sweet wines did crop up somewhere in the research we looked at, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they
and
did.
Absolutely, they often do come in clear glass, don't they?
They do.
The sugar definitely doesn't counteract anything. It might protect it slightly more. So sugar, polyphenolic content, you probably get a bit more of that in sweet wines, will have a protective effect to some extent. But give it enough time in the wrong kind of environment and lights, and even sweet wines will get ruined eventually. As Panagiotis said, the simplest solution, flint glass, is probably something we shouldn't use. Avoid it. Yeah.
As for light strike in the glass, absolutely the same can happen, as can oxidation. So you only ever have a limited time with your wine before it spoils. But you do want to enjoy how it looks in the glass. So the solution might be just don't pour huge measures and drink up.
Yeah. Drink up. That's always our advice, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, I think we should get a T-shirt with that on it. Okay, so we're now going to move on to other questions and feedback. We had one on SpeakPipe from Hannah Caldwell.
Kia ora, Susie and Peter. I am Hannah from New Zealand. I'm currently a cellar hand at a winery here in Cromwell in New Zealand. And my question is, what is your favourite wine out of Pinot Noir or Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc that you have tried from New Zealand regions? And also, I'd just like to say thank you so much. I have your podcast on repeat. I'm going through all of the episodes, and I'd just like to say thank you so much for keeping me company. Thank you so, so much.
Thanks for getting in touch, Hannah. And that's a great question, but a really tricky one to answer.
Yeah. Oh, we were blown away by the New Zealand Chardonnays in our episode on that. They really have gone to another level, haven't they, over the last few years?
They have, yeah.
And still great value for money in a global context. But then, I know you're a sucker for Sauvignon Blanc.
I am. I just love it. And the fact that lots of people are quite snobbish about it almost makes me want to champion it more. These days as well, everybody knows there's no such thing as New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. It's so diverse. You've got your classic passion fruit, pineapple rich sort of tropical styles that tend to come mostly from Wairau. Then you've got your tangy tomato leaf styles from Awatri. And then you've got really interesting things from Nelson or Hawke's Bay, Wairau Rapa, Waipara.
Yeah, and as for Pinot Noir, I mean, where to start? Just so many sensational wines. And like you say with Sauvignon Blanc, so much diversity from super elegant sappy styles to rich, darker, fruited, sort of oaky ones, but still refreshing, savoury wines. So the question is, though, what's our favourite? And we have to nail our colours to the mast for Hannah here.
I can't. I just can't. I can't. I absolutely love them all. And it really just depends what I'm in the mood for or what I'm eating, What I would say is I probably drink more Sauvignon and Chardonnay than New Zealand Pinot. And with regards to Sauvignon, if we're talking about that, my really favourite Sauvignons, as opposed to the everyday ones, would be those that are quite new wave, usually with a little bit of oak, and from one of the really top Marlborough producers. But I do love a cool, nutty, struck match New Zealand Chardonnay.
So you're going Chardonnay, that's why I'm seeing you there. And I'm going to go Pinot Noir. I'm going to go Pinot Noir. Either a super elegant, savoury Central Otago style, or a great sort of earthy Pinot from Martinborough.
So essentially we've both gone for two options, haven't we?
Well, sort of, yes.
Let's be fair.
We tried to make it sound like we've gone for one, but we've gone for two. Sorry, Hannah. It's just impossible to choose. I wonder what your favourite would be. There we go. Shift it. I imagine, you're in Cromwell, Hannah, so probably something like Central Pinot or Riesling. But let us know. In fact, all of you out there can let us know what your favourite New Zealand wine from Sauvignon to Chardonnay to Pinot is and from what region.
And just while we're on the topic of New Zealand wine, we wanted, didn't we, to briefly mention some social media activity around an Instagram post we put out about trying and loving the latest releases from Dog Point in Marlborough. Delicious, just so you know what they were, delicious 2023 Sauvignon Blanc, 2018 Section 94, and then the 2021s of the Chardonnay and the Pinot.
Yeah, I don't think we could actually choose between just them, let alone the other things.
That's what I mean.
So we said something with this Instagram post along the lines of, we'd run out of wine for the photo, basically. So, and what we said was, we blamed this. We said, clearly this was due to evaporation issues. It was absolutely nothing to do with us getting so excited by the wines. We polished them off.
Not at all.
No, absolutely. Let's just make that clear. But the guys at Dog Point played along, replying that evaporation issues happen to the best of us.
To which we replied, it's a very serious fault and they need to address this issue in their wines and put some sort of health warning on the bottles along the lines of, warning, this bottle may evaporate worryingly quickly. So look out for that on the 2024 labels.
Now, Janina Doyle also agreed that her wines evaporate too. And that an investigation was needed. And we agreed, this is a scandal. It's another scandal which needs investigation. So, we devised a name. Every scandal needs a sort of name.
Here we go.
The name for this scandal is Sudden Wine Evaporation Syndrome. Sweats.
There's your sweats.
Being the acronym. So if you get the sweats, we'd love to hear from you, including the symptoms and the wines concerned. This could be huge.
I think we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole here, aren't we? So let's move on.
We definitely are. Right, okay, so we had an intriguing story in from Lorena Gutierrez of Vinjoyment in relation to our Ukraine episode, didn't we?
We did. So Lorena wrote in to say, and I quote, I'm from Mexico City, but London is my home, and I really enjoy learning from you via your podcast. My husband and I have a wine tasting business, so it's an inspiration to know you can be married and work in wine together. Ha ha. I loved your podcast episode on Ukraine. It's so important to share those stories. Now, I wanted to share an anecdote. We visited Russia as tourists in 2019 and went to some of the highly recommended restaurants in Moscow. The sommelier suggested us to pair our meal with a Russian wine, Alma Valley Pinot Blanc from Crimea, because Crimea is Russian now. He said that about 8 times when describing and pouring the wine. I'm a geopolitics nerd and couldn't resist seeing that bottle. This was 5 years post-annexation. You can see the label very clearly shows the map of Crimea as well. I wish I had inquired more about the winemakers and who they were, but I bit my tongue because I didn't want to start a debate while in Moscow. But I've never had such mixed feelings about the origin of a wine I was drinking.
Yeah, gosh. A sobering reminder of the challenges facing winemakers all around the world, particularly those in conflict zones and in Ukraine. And Lorena did actually send us a picture of the bottle too, which we'll put on the show notes. Yeah. But thanks for getting in touch, Lorena, with that very poignant story. On a lighter note, Anna Gande got in touch on the subject of Tuesday night wines, didn't she?
She did, yeah. Anna wrote, I've just laughed out loud listening to an early wine blast where you coined the expression Tuesday night wines. I've been calling the reds on the wine rack in our kitchen that for years. In our house, they mean reds I buy that my husband is allowed to open without asking me. He's not allowed in the wine cellar. It's my baby. The irony is, it's never a Tuesday night because he's a surgeon and that's his on-call night. So I've no idea why I started calling them that. But it turns out you've been calling inexpensive, easy-drinking wine the same thing. All I can say is, great minds think alike.
Great minds indeed. Although I feel the restrictions, may be a little harsh here.
The cellar restrictions.
Yeah. I thought surgeons were renowned for their impeccable taste, weren't they? Anyway, I think I need to sort of move on before I get into relationship hot water. But
we're going to be divorcing in a minute.
There we go. Do let us know if you have any particular or peculiar wine slang or phrases that you use. We'd love to hear them, and we've all got them. And Peter Humphreys wrote in from Ontario to say, I've been a regular listener to Wine Blast for well over a year now. I never miss listening. I'm sending this note to let you know your live Q&A episode was the best and most entertaining episode that you have made. I want more. I learned a lot and was thoroughly enthralled. Your podcasts are always great, but this was at the top of them all. I get ready with a glass of wine, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, so I can listen and taste at the same time. A highlight of the week. Please have more podcasts like this one from time to time. It's very refreshing and entertaining. Come to the Niagara wine region in Ontario, Canada. There are some great wines here.
There are indeed some great wines there. Do you think this is our cue to go on a world tour? Kicking off with a massive gig in Niagara.
Undoubtedly. Let's diarise it. But thanks so much, Peter. It's very kind of you to say. And we will certainly try to do some more live Q&As in due course. Apart from anything else, we really enjoy it too. Yeah.
And it's also good to know where Peter's vote for which New Zealand wine and region would go.
Finally, someone who can make up their mind. Well done, Peter. I'd also add, in response to Peter's programme suggestion, thank you so much to all of you who've been in touch with so many brilliant proposals for future episode themes. We do give all of them very serious consideration. We can't make them all, but when we do, they're often pretty special.
And a case in point here is the Orange Wine two-parter we did as a result of David Dowling's prompt. We loved doing those programmes. We're really proud of them, and they've gone down very well too. And David got in touch after listening to say the following. I just wanted to say a huge thank you for more than fulfilling my suggested episode. If I had thought of my perfect episode, it would not have been as good as that double bill. I am sure it will be the perfect guide to both beginners and orange wine geeks like me. Plus, I had been meaning to buy Simon's book for ages, so a great excuse. I don't want to take sides. Ooh, here we go. Ooh. But I completely agree with Peter's lamb test.
Get in.
We will often have a particular tannic orange wine with the ginger pig's Barnsley chop recipe, which is apparently Roman. So what better pairing can you get? Although don't tell Sasha, but we agree with Susie, it's okay here, and do sometimes struggle with the Civi Pinot Grigio orange wines. Please keep up all the amazing work on the podcast.
That's so nice. Thank you, David. So glad you enjoyed that. Now, David, you also asked about writing competitions we'd recommend as a sort of stepping stone to get more involved in your passion. There aren't that many, are there?
Not really, no,
so,
not these days. There were more.
There used to be lots, but one we mentioned maybe is the 67 Pall Mall Awards, which is new and well worth a shout. You know, they look very sort of democratic and they're encouraging a very wide range of entries.
Yeah, I mean, they have just closed their entries for this year. So next year, why not? Yeah. Absolutely, really good shout. Right, I think we're almost at the point where we need to draw things to a close. But before we do, we just wanted to feature some extra feedback we've had, starting with an Apple review all the way from Bermuda. Miss T21 saying, awesome show, perfect for wine lovers and enthusiasts. I highly recommend it. It's not only informative with great topics, but the hosts are so charismatic and funny. Keep up the good work, guys.
Another 5-star review from Elvis reads, enjoying the education of this podcast, delivered in an engaging style while studying the WSET diploma. A welcome break from the textbooks. Met Susie at a wine tasting, and she is indeed lovely, friendly, knowledgeable, unpretentious, and I have seen Peter on screen in unusual wine places like Georgia and Lebanon, and he's great to listen to and learn from too. Keep them coming.
Very lovely, thank you. I'm sitting here quite blushing.
No, I can confirm
this. A bit red.
I can confirm this. But one other thing we'd say is, it's so nice when people come up to us and say, "Hi, I love the podcast," isn't it?
It is.
So thank you.
The fact you listen to it.
Exactly. Thank you to everyone who's done that. It not only gives us a massive boost, but one of the key things we wanted to do with this pod was, build a sort of like-minded community of wine lovers. Not just online, but also in the real world too. So if you see us, please do say hi. Like, for example, Callum, the brilliant sommelier who won our case of Bordeaux back in the day, said hi recently. It really does make our day.
Yeah. And just one last comment from an Instagram story in response to our Southern French Feast episode, where we paired Southern French wines with a series of dishes inspired by the region, but kind of dreamed up by me. Now, this is from Bronwen Beatty at Screwtops and Corks on Insta, who said, what an episode. I feel a wine blast recipe book coming on.
You'd love that, wouldn't you? Or would you? Would you actually, given you've already done sort of 12 years cooking up sort of Saturday kitchen recipes for that show and a fair amount with the podcast now too?
No, I love it. I love it. I would absolutely do a wine blast, cookbook. Yeah,
in all your free time. Yeah, that's the only problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Plus, didn't we say we sort of might offer recipes with our subscription model? I think we did, didn't we?
We did.
Which we are getting on to.
We will get on to.
I think Mike Smith asked for the lobster mac and arancini recipes a while ago, and that was the plan then. I think it still is. But we could do both.
We could, indeed.
Absolutely.
Why not?
And either way, just for the record, I would be a very willing recipe and wine tester.
I don't doubt it. Right. That's a good note, I reckon, to end on. By way of brief summary, wine is facing many challenges, from declining production and consumption to the perils of smartphones and weight loss drugs. But there's also plenty grounds for positivity too. Light strike is an issue the wine world needs to proactively address, and I may well be penning a wine blast cookbook at some stage soon.
With a glass of Kiwi Chardonnay in your hand. Thanks to all of you who got in touch with questions and feedback. Please do keep it coming. We'll put the email addresses and links to our SpeakPipe on our show notes, where we'll also put links to all these news stories. Please do also remember to give us a glowing rating and review on your podcast platform. It really helps. And don't forget to badger your friends and family to listen to, and ultimately become part of this wonderful Wine Blast community.
And if we haven't sent you to sleep yet, get yourself stuck into those sommelier sleep tapes. Sleep tapes. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, cheers.
Get the right tapes.